Welcome to this explainer. You know, when we hear about tigers in the news, we're usually talking about how close they are to extinction, right? We talk about saving them. But today, we're diving into a really heartbreaking and honestly kind of surprising paradox unfolding in India's greatest tiger stronghold. We're going to see how a monumental conservation success story is actually fueling a brand new, deadly battle for survival.
32. Take a second to just let that number sink in. That is the staggering number of tigers that have died in the state of Madhya Pradesh in just the first 5 months of 2026. 32 apex predators, gone in less than half a year. It's a massive toll, and honestly, it has absolutely shocked the conservation community. But to truly figure out why this is happening, we first need to understand the sheer scale of the tiger population we're dealing with here.
So Madhya Pradesh is essentially the tiger capital of India. It holds 785 of the country's 3,682 tigers. That's more than a fifth of the entire national population living in one state. But what's even more incredible is how fast that number is climbing. Between 2018 and 2022, their tiger numbers surged by an astonishing 49%. To put that into perspective for you, the national average growth rate was just 24%. So they are doing incredibly well at breeding and protecting tigers. But here's the catch. That rapid boom, it's exactly what set the stage for the current crisis. Think of it like a giant puzzle where the pieces no longer fit. In dense core areas like Kanha and Bandhavgarh, the tiger population has just skyrocketed. But their actual habitat size? It's remained exactly the same. The living room didn't get any bigger. Because dominant, older tigers naturally claim the absolute prime real estate in the center, we're seeing this really dangerous spillover effect. Weaker, aging, or younger tigers are literally being pushed out of the safe zones because they have to go search for new territories of their own. And because of this severe overcrowding, an estimated 40% of Madhya Pradesh's tigers are now spending time in areas completely outside of protected zones. Even more alarming, nearly 20% are moving through heavily human-dominated landscapes. We're talking agricultural belts, highways, village fringes. And this leads us to a really grim statistic. 80% of the tiger mortalities reported this year happened outside of those protected areas. We are finding tiger carcasses kilometers away from reserve forests. They aren't dying deep in the wild anymore. They are dying in our backyards.
Now, for decades, whenever you heard about tiger deaths, the narrative was almost always dominated by international wildlife syndicates. You know, those highly organized poaching rings trading in tiger pelts and body parts. But forest officials have actually confirmed that these global networks have largely been dismantled in the region. Today, only about 11% of deaths fall into that category of confirmed traditional poaching. The real threat has fundamentally shifted. It's now completely decentralized, highly localized, and honestly, way harder to monitor. The new threat? It's coming from local farmers and bushmeat hunters living right on the edges of the forests.
And this highly localized threat takes a really deadly form, the accidental trap. See, the vast majority of these tigers aren't actually being hunted for their pelts at all. They are unknowingly walking right into crude, illegal electric wire traps. What happens is, farmers and bushmeat hunters tap into conventional 11 kilovolt power lines, the normal ones meant for everyday domestic and farm supply, to kill wild boars for meat or just to protect their crops from herbivores. But these high-voltage live wires, they don't discriminate. So when a tiger gets pushed out of the reserve and wanders into a farm at night, it touches the wire and is instantly electrocuted. Because these electrocutions are almost always an accident, the perpetrators instantly panic, and that panic leads to brutal cover-ups that make this entire crisis incredibly hard to track. Take a recent incident in Sioni, for example. A tigress was electrocuted on an illegal live wire near some farmland. To destroy the evidence, the culprits actually dragged her massive carcass, dumped it into a well, and burned the live wires. In another really terrifying case near the Satpura Tiger Reserve, a tiger was poisoned, buried, and its tracking collar was intentionally burnt to a crisp to avoid detection. Investigators actually suspect that specific killing might have been linked to protecting illegal opium cultivation in the area. The lengths people are going to hide these deaths are just extreme.
Which brings us to a chilling reality, pulled straight from the state's mortality records. Quote, nearly 1 in every 5 tiger deaths recorded in the state last year was linked to electrocution. I mean, let that sink in for a moment. 1 in 5. Overall, in 2025, Madhya Pradesh recorded 55 tiger deaths, which translates to a mortality rate of roughly 7%. That is noticeably higher than the national average, which hovers somewhere under 5%. So this electrocution epidemic, it is silently decimating the population.
Okay, but here is a kind of fascinating, positive counterpoint to all this grim data. While the national average for even detecting tiger deaths in the first place is about 54%, Madhya Pradesh's detection rate is a massive 84%. So why the huge difference? Well, officials attribute this to incredibly intensive patrolling and robust systems that make sure almost all carcasses, even the hidden ones in remote buffer areas, are eventually found. But there is a very specific, highly technical reason they are catching so many of these electrocution cases in particular.
It's a process the Special Tiger Protection Force uses, and it is basically true crime grid sleuthing. Here's exactly how it works. Step 1, an animal or object touches one of those illegally tapped live wires. Step 2, this causes the power line to short to the ground. Step 3, that short triggers an immediate trip in the local power supply. And Step 4 is where the magic happens. The electricity department's records automatically capture the exact time, date, duration, and location of that power disruption. Forest officials are now teaming up with the energy department to analyze this power line trip data right alongside GPS locations. It lets them establish exact timelines, literally pinpoint the electrocution hotspots, and catch the culprits red-handed. It's a completely brilliant adaptation to a modern threat.
However, justice officials are finally learning to fight the electrocution epidemic. A second, completely invisible threat has emerged from the village fringes. It's called canine distemper virus, or CDV for short. It's a highly infectious, fatal disease, and it's transmitted from domesticated dogs directly to wild carnivores. Because tigers are increasingly moving through human-dominated lands, they are coming into unprecedented close contact with feral and village dogs. And the devastation this virus can cause is just absolute. Recently, the Kanha Tiger Reserve, which is one of the absolute prime core habitats, battled a severe CDV outbreak. 5 tigers from a single family, a mother tigress and her 4 cubs, they were entirely wiped out by just one single viral outbreak. It perfectly illustrates just how incredibly fragile these populations are when they are forced to interact with the edges of human civilization.
So the Forest Department's response to this kind of biological threat had to be incredibly aggressive and incredibly fast. They utilized a multi-layered emergency containment strategy. First, they immediately launched rapid vaccination drives, vaccinating nearly 100 domesticated dogs across 8 buffer villages. Then, they literally sealed off a 2-square-kilometer patch of forest linked to the outbreak to act as a strict quarantine zone. They even went as far as completely draining the water bodies inside that quarantine zone and disinfecting them using lime and bleaching powder to ensure the virus couldn't spread through the water supply. It is, for all intents and purposes, full-scale biological warfare to protect these big cats.
Which brings us to the ultimate question we really have to ask ourselves as we wrap up this explainer. As tiger populations bounce back, can we adapt our human landscapes fast enough to keep them alive? Madhya Pradesh has definitely proven that we know how to breed and protect tigers inside the boundaries of a national park. But the tiger's own success has pushed it past those boundaries, right into our power lines, our farms, and our local diseases. The challenge is no longer just about stopping organized poachers, it's about evolving the way we live, the way we farm, and how we manage our infrastructure right on the fringes of the wild. Because if we can't adapt our world to make room for their expanding numbers, our greatest conservation victory might just end up engineering its own collapse. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. I hope looking at this data gave you a much clearer understanding of the real, complex issues facing India's tigers today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.